Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you once again to the airwaves of Salam Media this evening. It is Wednesday nights with myself, Inayat Wadi, as we welcome you to the broadcast this evening. Now, we are still focusing on the war on Gaza, the massacre, the genocide that is unfolding, and these are untold proportions. And right across the entire world, we are seeing reaction coming through with regard to Gaza. And these massacres are taking place on a day-to-day basis, on an hourly basis, and it is horrific. This is obviously something that we've never seen in the modern era, and this brutal Zionist supremacist racist Israeli army, with the help of the West and others right across the entire world, non-stop, relentless in their campaign, the bombing campaign. And the entire world is up in arms. We've seen so many protests take place right across the entire world. We've seen people, we've seen activists, we've seen human rights organizations. And today we've even seen countries like Chile, Bolivia, Colombia withdrawing their Israeli ambassadors. The question is the Muslim world. What is the Muslim world doing? And it is clear that as far as the Muslim world is concerned, we have got armies, we've got armies that are so well equipped in every way whatsoever, whether we're talking about manpower, we're talking about armaments, we're talking about sophisticated weapons, all of that. And while the people of Gaza are being slaughtered, and also in other areas surrounding Palestine, where we see all this mayhem that is taking place, we see a Muslim Ummah that seems to be not a Muslim Ummah, I would rather say a Muslim world that is impotent to in more than one way. Now, we've seen also reaction come through from the likes of the International Union of Muslim Scholars, who said in a press conference that the ruling regimes and official armies are required by the Islamic Sharia to intervene urgently to save Gaza from the genocide and mass destruction. Leaving Gaza and Palestine to be annihilated and destroyed is a betrayal of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and is one of the greatest sins before Allah Almighty. And the military intervention is a Sharia obligation, especially from the four countries that are bordering Palestine: Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And this is the reason why we have this evening, we've assembled a panel to discuss why the Arab and the Muslim world cannot do anything about Gaza. And included in this panel is Imam Fuad Samai, member of the Muslim Judicial Council. We've got Mazhar Khan out of the United Kingdom, member of Hizb ut-Tahrir. And shortly, we will also be joined by our respected Honorable Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali, the President of the United Ulama Council of South Africa. Imam Fuad Samai, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh, Inayat, to you and to Mazhar.
Jazakallah khair. And also Sheikh Mazhar Khan, assalamu alaikum to you, my brother.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, my friend Inayat, and to Imam Fuad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Yes, Mazhar, just starting off with you, and I know you've written and you've spoken and you've said so much, and it's not only now that this war on Gaza is taking place, and you've always raised concern about how impotent the Muslim world is, the Muslim leadership in particular, the Muslim armies, and with the genocide, the carnage that is unfolding, Muslims on the ground, millions right across the entire world are asking this question: why is the Arab and the Muslim world impotent and unable to do anything about what is happening in Gaza?
Yeah, Jazakallah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. You know, this time round, Brother Inayat, it's become very obvious across the world the absence or the inaction of the Muslim rulers in the area. Previously, people made excuses and said this and that, but now it's become so exposed and so clear. And I think you mentioned in your introduction that on every single metric you might want to measure the Muslim nations with the Zionist settler state, we excel. When it comes to money, you know, Qatar just spent 200 billion with loose change on a World Cup, you know, whereas the Zionist settler state has to take around 4 billion donation each year from the Americans. The security is secured by the Arab regimes. So on every metric, whether it's resources, whether it's finances, whether it's manpower, whether it's military, on every single metric, the Muslims are on top. But where we are not on top is that our political governance, our political leaders are not independent, they're not free, they are puppets. And that's our problem. And this time, it's boiling over, where even the people in the armed forces are feeling it. So you might have heard just last week where the President Sisi in Egypt had to publicly announce and address the military, and he says, don't take any emotional or rash actions with regards to what's going on across the border. So for him to come out and say that shows that there is a strong feeling in the armed forces. And maybe we can talk about this later. Some people are saying, oh, well, what the armed forces are going to do, they're as corrupt as the regime. That I don't accept, and we can talk about that later. But I think the rulers are exposed, especially Erdogan. Erdogan has got, I think that in 1 year alone, the Zionists exported over $2 billion worth of goods. Daily, there are gas shipments from Turkey to the Zionist settler state, which is used by their army to kill Muslims. And then what does Erdogan do? Because of the popular feeling in Turkey, he organizes a demonstration. And that is very humiliating, because demonstrations are done by people without authority appealing to the government to act. He is the government. And who is he appealing to? Who is he demonstrating to? And if he's claiming he hasn't got power, we don't accept that, because he sent his military to Libya, he sent his military to Azerbaijan, he sent his military to Iraq and Syria. So he can send his military when he wants to. But here, and he actually has sent his aeroplanes and helicopters into Palestine, but that was to put out forest fires to help the Zionist occupiers and not to help the Muslims. So this time they are very exposed, and people are asking these questions, that what are the rulers doing? And I think this time more than ever, they've been exposed. And I think we need to realize that our problem is a very simple problem. It is a political problem. You know, all the other things people talk about, Iman, disunity, these things always exist. The Ummah has never been free from disunity or lack of Iman or whatever else. But the problem we have today is very specific, and that is the political absence of the Islamic voice in the global scene.
Jazakallah for that, Brother Bazar. I see Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali has joined us. Maulana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Haji Inayat, and to the panelists, and as well as to all the viewers, alhamdulillah.
Yes, Maulana, this is an extremely important discussion. We are 4 weeks into this brutality and this carnage and this genocide that is unfolding. And we've seen even coming out of Hamas, where almost every statement they've made on Hamas online, talking about the context of this brutality that is taking place, calling on all the Arab countries, calling on Muslim countries to free the people across the globe, and also at the same time to support the rights of people to freedom, justice. All of this at the end of the day, and as Brother Mazhar Khan has mentioned, that despite our ikhtilaf, despite we have our disunity, was in the Muslim Ummah. The Muslim Ummah at this point in time, considering what is unfolding in Gaza, are united. People right across the entire world, and we've seen reactions come through, Maulana, from across the world, where there is protests, and it's not only Muslims, non-Muslims as well have actually supported the people of Palestine. But again, huge question marks that are being asked about Muslim leadership. Where do the Muslim leaders stand on this? And we've seen this repeatedly. We've seen what had happened at the Cairo summit. We've seen the OIC. We've seen many of the Muslim countries, again, calling on the United Nations, appealing to the West, appealing to the likes of the United States of America. But looking at the Muslim world itself, we're doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me, from the very offset, also express my deep disappointment. I mean, the world has not seen a genocide, the extent of this, and the killing and the murdering of innocent people. The number of children that has been killed is exponential. It is growing day by day. And it is playing off in front of the world. And whilst the masses are rising across the globe particular power over the masses, whereby we don't see the uprising or the sloganization, or where the voices are able to express their solidarity and support on the basis of humanity with the Palestinian people. And that is very, very disturbing and very, very painful, because it is a reality when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks about mathalul mu'minina fi tawadihim wa tarahumim mathalul jasad. The example of the believer is that of one body, and a part of this body is in pain, the other part of the body must be able to experience this. But I want to take this back 17 years ago or 16 years ago, when Hamas won the elections and when Gaza came under the authority of Hamas, and how at that particular period in time the world responded, and how the Arab world responded to the elections, the fair elections that was won by Hamas to be in the leadership. And during this particular period in time, we know what Gaza has gone through, what has happened, or the living conditions, the circumstances that Gaza find themselves in, and the people in Gaza find themselves in. That open air prison is not something that has come about 2 or 3 years ago. It has been coming on for almost 17 years. And during that particular period in time, what was the position of the Arab rulers and the Arab nations towards the people of Gaza? How has that played off by itself? So today, when we see this huge escalation of indiscriminate killing and the massacre that plays itself off, how does that fit in 17 years ago to what is currently happening today and what the expectations are? And during this particular period in time, we know there has been so much of talk and so much of negotiations that ultimately led to normalization at the expense of the Palestinian people, who are the owners of the land, whose land has been occupied. They have been totally trampled upon. They've totally been dehumanized. And that is a phase prior to, obviously, the genocide and the massacre that we witnessed. And so the reality of the situation is, what our brother Mazhar is saying, it's a matter and a point of consideration in regard to the extent of Western influence in the Middle East to the point wherein Gaza and the Palestinian people, they are standing totally alone. They experiencing betrayal. If we have to speak to the people of Palestine, they over the period of time, their expressions has been, we have to do this for ourselves. And so it is a very important discussion and debate that will be an ongoing discussion and debate, and there are certain matters that is of certainty, that is very, very clear, and there are certain areas where we cannot be in denial of what is playing itself off. I mean, the mere fact that the United States of America, the audacity that they have, for him to go to the Middle Eastern countries and still be able to influence the position of the Arab leaders, despite what is happening on the one side. It is the reality. And Mufti Taqi Uthman, he said it so very beautiful. He said that on the one hand, what is termed as in defense of Israel, they are the occupier. They are the guilty party. But the support in defense of Israel, what about the occupied? The people who have been occupied, who is the victim? So the very same type of outreach cannot be given to the people of Palestine. So really, it's a matter of very deep concern and very, very painful.
Jazakallah for that, Maulana. And I know Imam Fasima, you've got to go for the Maghrib Salah shortly, but just very quickly before you go for Maghrib Salah and rejoin us again. And what Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali is saying, and Brother Mazhar also, this is truth for the versus reality. And at the end of the day, the reality on the ground reflects what we are feeling as a Muslim Ummah. And truth must be told no matter how bitter it is. But at the end of the day, if we need to call a spade, we must call a spade a spade. And this is where we're looking at the lack of the Muslim world, the Muslim countries in particular, the leadership in terms of helping the Palestinian cause, where we look at, not a drop of water, not a grain of food, not a bottle of medicine has gotten into Gaza. And these are our brothers, these are our sisters, these are our mothers, these are our children. And to watch all of this unfolding and find ourselves unable to do nothing at all.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think that listening to my colleagues, one comes to the conclusion, draws the conclusion that it is about time that the Ummah realizes that we cannot at all depend on the Arab nations, or rather, not the nations as such, but the rulers of those nations to come to the assistance of the Palestinians. What is said, I just want to bring to your attention two very important things before I forget, is that there are individuals being used within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia trying to push a particular narrative. And this narrative is that, number one, is that why is it expected of us to stand up for the Palestinians? The Palestinians, number one, they're not Arab. They are not original Arab. They are not of us. That you'll find on certain TikToks, and we know where it comes from. Secondly is a very dangerous question, not a question, a statement, where the Quran is being used, and they use this, this ayah, which speaks about the land of Palestine, and they make no two bones about it, saying that the Quran, according to the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the land of Palestine to the Jews. If you take those two things, just take those two things in consideration, it is something that which we should immediately combat. We should not wait for it to take root in our communities, because there are definitely those. We must remember we need to differentiate between the populace, between the people of those countries and their rulers. There is a distinct difference between the two, a very distinct difference between the two. I think that should they get the opportunity, we saw it in Egypt as an example now, how the people, how they rose up in defense of Palestine. This, unfortunately, you find that would not the case, especially in the Gulf countries, except maybe for Kuwait to a certain extent. Other than that, you'll find we sit with this particular problem. I want to draw your attention to something, and that is a question that one needs to pose is, can, there's quite a number of things which I wanted to mention here, can the Israelis be trusted? The Israelis be trusted with any treaty? Here, I want to draw your attention to something very important. I think that this, it is something just as a sort of a means for us to understand where we're heading. And that if you go back to the Oslo Accords, as example now, both the Oslo Accords, the first and the second one as well, between Yitzhak Rabin and the famous handshake between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, as example now. There, it is clear that was in 1993 and the second was in 1995. Supposed to be after 5 years, they were supposed to be, the Israel was supposed to be, it was brought to 1967 borders. They were supposed to have the independence and whatever. Up till today, there's not even a sign of it. We know every single treaty, it seems that this is in their genes. It seems as though we do not want to, because there are Jews that we understand the difference between Jews and Zionists. We don't go into that. But it would seem as though at no point can they be trusted when it comes to any particular treaty. There are a number of things which I'd like to mention as we carry on, but I don't want to diverge from the topic with which you are busy with now, or that particular aspect of our discussion. I will come back to it later, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah, yes, Sheikh Fuad Samai is going off for the Maghrib Salah. But Brother Mazhar, I think just to come back to what Imam Fuad Samai had to say, and he mentioned about the justification using the Quran, questioning the fact as to who the land belongs to. And sadly, I've seen it in certain publications coming through from certain ulama who have also raised this question that, Palestine belongs to the Jews because they conquered it from the Palestinians, and whoever is the conqueror is the owner of the land. And, in one of the articles that they had basically published, and they spoke about this at length, going back to the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, going back to the time of Salahuddin Ayyubi, when he had conquered Palestine, and then right until 1948, when Palestine again lost all their land. But what I'm saying is, at a time like this, these are publications that are coming out. These are debates that are taking place. When we see 25 days or 26 days of relentless bombing, we see all the death, the destruction, the devastation, the carnage taking place, and here we have people that are still questioning the fact as to who the land belongs to.
The people are not questioning this. I think we all recognize that the Zionists have lost the propaganda war. You've got your mainstream media, and you've got the Western leaders on one side, and you've basically got the entire global population on the other side. I mean, these demonstrations we've seen, like here in London, for example, 300,000, the majority of them were not Muslim. Yeah. So non-Muslims. So people don't buy this propaganda. Now, this is a desperate attempt by the Arab regimes to try and deflect the attention or trying to create a different narrative. Now, this thing about they're not Arabs, I don't care whether the Palestinians are Arab or not. Let's say, for example, they're not Arabs. So what? Rasulullah went there. He prayed there. All the Anbiya came there. He led them all in Salah. It's linked to our Iman. Umar al-Faruq went to liberate it. He went to take Islam there. Umar al-Faruq liberated it. Sultan Qutuz liberated it. Sultan Abdul Hamid al-Thani protected it in its dying days. These were Turkish people, Kurdish people, Qurayshi people, Egyptian people. It's not about nationality. It's about Iman. It doesn't matter whether you're Arab or not Arab. Palestine belongs to the whole Muslim Ummah, is connected to our Iman. So these are bogus discussions. And when they talk about it belongs to the Banu Israel, no, it doesn't. It was promised to the descendants of Ibrahim alayhi salam who believe in Allah. And Ismail alayhi salam's descendancy is the one that believe in Allah. We are the only believers that give salams to Ibrahim alayhi salam in our salah every day. The Jews don't do that. The Christians don't do that. We are the descendants who come from Ibrahim alayhi salam. We are the ones who've been promised that land. It's the believers who are promised that land. These people have left that belief, so they are not entitled to that land. And this argument about conquering, this is a nonsense argument. It wasn't conquered. Actually, the British occupied Gaza in 1917, and the Zionists didn't have the political power to establish a state. Britain granted it to them, and then Britain forced the immigrants to go from Europe to Palestine. They didn't allow the refugee ships to dock in Britain, and the Americans didn't allow the refugees from Poland and Germany to dock in America. They were diverted to Palestine to populate this colony, which the European colonial powers created for their own purpose. Like Joe Biden, this clip going around on social media said, if Israel didn't exist, we would have to create one. It does a great job in protecting our interests. So this idea that the Zionists control the world, no, they don't. This is a myth created by themselves and by the Western powers and the Arab leaders. So the Ummah thinks, we can't touch this state. But on every metric, as I said earlier in the introduction, we are better than them, stronger than them, richer than them, more powerful than them. But this myth has been created, which has been obliterated by the Mujahideen from Gaza, where a few guys with guns caused panic throughout the entire state. So this is not an invincible state. This myth has been blown away. And the rulers have been left exposed, who've been saying, oh, we can't attack them, they're too strong. If a handful of guys with light arms can cause this kind of panic, what would a few jets and a few tanks and a few proper soldiers do? So this nonsense that they put across is trying to counter the growing Muslim public opinion that we need to send the armies. And I think we need to be very clear about this. So you talked about, in the introduction, you talked about the International Union of Muslim Scholars. Also, Taqi Usmani, rahimahullah, he also issued an edict saying that it is an obligation of capability on the people surrounding the area nearest, which means the armed forces of Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, these countries. And many other ulama. Sheikh Isam Amira from Al-Quds also gave this announcement that it's an obligation of jihad on the armed forces. He was arrested the very next day by the Zionist police. So all the scholars are now saying this. But what we are saying is we have to say this. The solution is very clear from Islam, is jihad. It always has been, always will be. That's the way it was liberated before. And we need to appeal to the Muslim armies to do the job, because the rulers are not going to do it. The rulers are not going to move. We have to appeal directly to the armies to do that. And we've been doing this, and it's a growing call in the Muslim world. And some people will say, but the armies are corrupt. The armies are not good. Look, in every institution, you will have good and bad people. Yeah. Amongst the pious people, there are sinful people. That's always been the case. But if you look at the armed forces, there are many good people in the armed forces. I'll give you an example. In Syria, when Bashar al-Assad told the army to turn its guns on the people, when they had the uprising over 10 years ago, most of the army abandoned the government and they formed the rebel forces. If you look when Anwar Sadat signed the Camp David Accords in 79, it's his cadets from his own army that shot him live in front of the world's cameras. So there are people with Iman in these armed forces, and we are now talking to them directly. Disobey your leaders, move, because the dua of the Ummah is with you, the dua of the oppressed are with you, you are in the right, and Allah is with you. And the honor bestowed upon Salahuddin al-Ayyubi in this life and in the akhirah waits you as well, because Allah is not limited in his mercy and Allah is not limited in his reward. The khazana of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not limited. So whoever takes this step, there is a mighty reward. And the best example is that of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. He is the one who gave the nasr to the Prophet to establish Islam in Medina. And he said, I'm willing to fight and die for this deen. He was only a Muslim for 6 years. But when he passed away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent 70,000 angels to take part in his janazah. And the arsh of Rabbul Alameen shook. So this is the enormity of the honor Allah gave to this companion purely because he gave the material, physical support to the Prophet. This same reward is waiting for our armed forces. And this is the da'wah we need to give to them. Rise to the occasion. The Ummah in its millions are making dua for you. Go, we have got your backs. Don't worry about the rulers because they are finished. Because if you move from them, they can't even rely on the Western powers to support them now. The Western world is fragmented. They are on the decline. They can't do what they did in Iraq, where they got all the armies together. They can't do that again. Look at Afghanistan, 20 years and they had to run away. When we fight with Iman, we will fight on a spreadsheet. America will spend $2 trillion and say, we spent enough, we need to leave Afghanistan. We won't. We don't put a price on honor. We don't put a price on obligation. We don't put a price on what is halal. We will do it to the best of our abilities and we will keep doing it until we succeed. And this is the practical manifestation of our Iman. Whereas the West, it's material, cost benefit. They fight with Excel spreadsheets. If it's no longer beneficial, they will leave. If it's no longer beneficial, they will drop the Zionist settler state as well. Don't forget that. It is not, they are not joined at the hip. When they realize that this is now a bigger liability to us, they will drop it. And remember, those Zionists will have nowhere to run because they won't be able to run to Europe. They were kicked out of Europe into that colony. They will come back running to this Ummah. And whether we like them or we don't like them, we will look after them because it's an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they know that. And just like the Jews in Medina turned their back against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they knew that only under Islam do they have protection. Allah says in the Quran, ضربت عليهم الذلة أينما ثقفوا إلا بحبل من الله وحبل من الناس, that Allah has disgraced them wherever they go, except if they live under the protection of Allah or live under the protection of other men. Meaning Allah has guaranteed they are insecure. They cannot secure themselves. So they will have to go running. At the moment, it's the West. And it was Muhammad Mufti Shafi, rahimullah, in his tafsir of Ma'arif al-Quran in Surah Al-Imran, he talks about this verse. And he says that because the state of Israel exists, this verse proves that they are not the protectors of it. There are other people protecting that state, i.e. the Arabs, rulers, the Western powers, and the Americans. They cannot find security themselves. So talking about invincibility, it flies against the facts and it flies against the Quran. And this Ummah is in a strong position. We just need to realize that we need to remove our political leaders who don't represent Islam, re-establish Khilafah Rashida, unify the Ummah, and again, we need to take the rightful position of the guardians of humanity. And that is what we need to do. Bismillah.
Yes, Jazakallah for that, brother. And just to bring Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali back into the discussion, Maulana, just, at a time like this, the one person I think of a lot is our marhum Maulana Ihsan Hendricks, rahimahullah, especially in the time of crisis and in terms of, the Ummah providing direction, providing guidance when the Ummah is asking so many questions. And he was your colleague for many, many years. And I think of him a lot at a time like this, because I want to talk a bit about the International Union of Muslim Scholars. And I know, Maulana, you posted this on one of the groups this morning in terms of the ruling that they have given. And you know who the International Union of Muslim Scholars are and why they issued this press release and why they issued the statement. And perhaps, Maulana, if you could just give us more of an insight, because these are a whole group of international ulama that have made the statements, and they must have given it a lot of thought, and they must have obviously driven by what they witnessed around them, and this is the reason why they have issued the statement, Maulana.
Yes, so coming back to the point, you're actually absolutely correct when you speak about Maulana Ihsan. Maulana Ihsan had a deep understanding of the Middle Eastern politics. And he had extensively read about the politics that plays itself in the Arab world. And having said that, Maulana traveled extensively to the Arab world. He was one of the members of the Majlis al-Umana, the senior forum of the Ittihad al-Ulama, the International Union of Muslim Scholars. And he was a very highly respected member of that particular forum. So currently, the Secretary General of that particular forum is Dr. Ali Karadaghi, who is a respected alim, is a scholar. They are based in Qatar, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, and they've got ulama from numerous countries, and the Muslim Judicial Council was represented by Maulana Ihsan Hendricks. And it is obviously, earlier the point that Imam Fuad Samai made in regard to some fatwa that have been issued or a certain Shari position have been taken. And so the group of International Union of Muslim Scholars, they've come together. They've looked obviously of what is happening. We need to understand fundamentally the matter of preservation and protection of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak is the center. The Ardul Muqaddasa is the center. The human lives that is being savaged here is at central points. And Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak are being threatened. And we know that it is one of the ideals of the Zionist entity to destroy Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. And in recent years, or in recent months, and in recent times, despite normalization, despite the fact that the Arab world has created a partnership and relationship and normal relationships with the Zionist Israel state, They have not been able to prevent the very serious violation and the sanctity of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak. It is happening glaringly in front of all of us in the Arab world and the Arab leaders. Now you wonder yourselves, I mean, if this is a house of Almighty Allah, and it is not an ordinary, every house of Almighty Allah is a place of sanctity. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ. It is a house of Almighty Allah. What makes Masjid Al-Aqsa Mubarak so significant is because it's Qiblatul Ula. And because it is Qiblatul Ula, it is the Masra of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is a place where the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasallam made sujood. It is not a place that wherein we can mess around and play around in terms of wanting to divide. We will never allow that to happen to the Baytullah al-Haram or Masjidun Nabawi. We cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow this to happen in this particular instance here. So the group of ulama, when they look at this particular situation as it plays itself off, the Palestinian people, they represent the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the Murabitin and Murabitat for this particular Mubarak and blessed land, Al-Ardul Muqaddasa. They are representing us. They are now placed in this particular situation where they are bombarded, where the Western world is now rallied around the Zionist Israel apartheid state to lend support to them. And here the Palestinians, they are almost cordoned off. Look at what is currently happening. I mean, it is so disturbing, disgusting to think in terms of what currently is happening with Palestinians in the West Bank. What is happening with the Palestinian farmers, those that stays in the villages. These settlers are being armed by this right-wing government. Go out. It's almost a free license that has been given to them. And there's no, obviously, no repercussions to that. There hasn't been, and very few, and distance, if it were ever. And Israel, the apartheid Israel state, are not even going to be brought to task by international law or by the United Nations. So, in light of this, the ulama, the Ittihad al-Ulama, they have gathered, they've had a look at this scenario, and they've issued that particular fatwa. I've said it there. Obviously, I don't have the script with me now, but the reality of the situation is that they had to take a position, and I picked up on one of the Mauritanian scholars who equally has issued a fatwa in this particular regard. I don't have that script also with me, unfortunately. I just found myself in a bit of a situation that I couldn't have access to these particular documents. But it is there, where in this particular appeal have been made. The fight or the struggle or the standing in protection here is not, this is not a conflict between, and this is how the Zionists would want to create it as such, between Israel and Hamas. This is not an Israel-Hamas conflict. It is where they want to obliterate the entire Palestinian nation, push them into the sea. They are animals. All of them must be wiped out. And so when the call is being made by the Ittihad al-Ulama, it is a matter wherein some form of directive are given to say that, listen, these are very critical scenarios. These are the situation where the Ummah find itself around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Al-Mubarak. There is no khilafat at this moment in time. As ulama, this is the position that we present as a fatwa to the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may Allah guide us.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair so much. And to bring Imam Fuad Samai back here into the discussion. Now, as Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali mentioned, Imam Fuad, that this is not only about Israel and Hamas. This is a problem that the entire Ummah is faced with. When October the 7th, the statement that came out of Ismail Haniya, he said that this is not about the Palestinians only. It's not about the Arabs. It's not only about the Muslim Ummah. it is about Masjid Al-Aqsa. And this is the reason why they called it the Al-Aqsa flood. And again, we've heard it over and over again about Palestine. Palestine is not a nation. Palestine is a cause. It is a cause that speaks to oppression, that speaks to death, to destruction, to devastation, to a cause for freedom and liberation. And this is what the Palestinian people are made of. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used the people of Palestine to protect the honor of Masjid Al-Aqsa on behalf of an Ummah that is 1.6 billion strong. And one cannot treat this thing lightly. And this is the reason why the Muslim Ummah needs a wake-up call. This is the reason why the Muslim nations need a wake-up call, that they need to embrace the cause, the liberation, the freedom of the people of Palestine, and to end all this oppression, this genocide, this death, this destruction, this devastation that is taking place.
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Really, I was listening to Sheikh Mazhar, and I was really, it sort of created a sort of a very, very positive, outlook towards this situation. The whole question of looking at Deen, looking at Iman, and I want to bring this particular point in here and say that the day when this Ummah, as a collective, going to understand that Masjid Al-Aqsa is one of the Sha'a'illah, one of the symbols of Allah. And Allah speaks about who will defend, who will respect the Sha'a'ir, the symbols of Allah. ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Allah speaks about a certain level of consciousness that you'll find that is required for people to show and pay homage and to show respect and greatness to the sanctity of Sha'a'ir of the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who are those people? People of true taqwa will never be able to, at all, in the least, will they be able to accept the fact that Masjid Al-Aqsa, one of the greatest Sha'a'ir of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't want to go into those details. We are aware of the fada'il, of the virtues of Masjid Al-Aqsa. But to see it being desecrated by settlers, being desecrated by such people who absolutely has one thing in mind, and that is their whole objective is to eventually demolish Masjid Al-Aqsa. This brings us to another point, and that is, if we look at South Africa, in 2008, a high-profile ANC delegation went to Palestine. And upon their return, several of those, members of the delegation observed that apartheid in South Africa was a party in comparison with the apartheid that they experienced or that they could see in Palestine. Let me give you one example. During the worst days of apartheid, and I grew up during the worst days of apartheid in the 1960s, but during the worst days of apartheid, one was what was called this is for Mazhar's information as well, and also for young people listening in, and that is that the Group Areas Act, which forcibly removed hundreds of thousands of people from areas such as District 6 in Cape Town, Claremont, and other towns like Paarl, and up there in Johannesburg, we have Sophia Town, etc., etc. What is amazing if you look at it now, during the time people were removed, their houses were demolished, but the apartheid government of South Africa did not demolish one single masjid. The Muslims were prepared to stand up. They were prepared to lose their houses, but they were not prepared to, at all, to lose the respect of the masajid. An example of this, and this you are very well aware of this, Inayat, and that is, take the example of the Pier Street Masjid in Port Elizabeth. It's a masjid, Mazhar, a masjid there in Port Elizabeth, one of the cities in South Africa. They wanted to build a highway over that masjid, but the minaret of that masjid, the Empire State, small masjid, very small masjid, the minaret was a bit too high, and it was sort of like a an obstacle for this highway. What happened? They took the case to the highest of courts to save even the minaret, and that minaret stands up till today. That's the worst days of apartheid in South Africa. Not a single masjid. How many masajid have been destroyed in Palestine? More than 1,300 have already been destroyed. Others, that those were still standing. We went there. They took us, they showed us these places. That where they showed us around what is now Tel Aviv and all those, and those areas, they took us some of these places of the masajid. Today, they are nightclubs, they are cow sheds, they are pubs. This is what they've done to our masajid. Where is this ummah? How can this ummah, and this once again, I always wonder that how do these Muslim rulers, Arab rulers, who understand the Quran, and it's true, when Allah speaks about that Allah sent Rasulullah وَيُعَلِّمُهُ الْكِتَابِ, to teach people the kitab, because not only reading and understanding, they had, which means that do they understand? How do they understand when Allah speaks about وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا. Just a literal translation of this, even a literal, not even tafsir. We won't go into the tafsir of this ayah. Just a literal translation, it would seem as though this ayah was revealed after the 7th of October of this year, where Allah says, وَمَا لَكُمْ, who Allah speaks here to, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ, what is it that prevents you from fighting in the path of Allah when circumstances are such, في سبيل الله, in the path of Allah, والمستضعفين, when the oppressed, من الرجال, of men, والنساء, of women, والولدان, and children, الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالمة, who cry out to Allah that, oh Allah, that relieve us, take us out. In other words, bring relief to the oppression that we experienced in this place now. This is the beginning of the ayah. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. What prevents you, when you see this happening, what prevents you from standing up for the rights of the oppressed? Even if those oppressed were non-Muslims, even if the oppressed were Yahud also, for that matter, even if they were Yahud, we as Muslims would have been compelled to stand up for the rights of each and every human being. Then, maybe in conclusion, the point I'm trying to make here is, very often the thought just comes to mind, and that is, if the Zionists, if they can have just one single start off with one single idea in their minds, and that is that the Palestinians are human beings. If the point of departure could be they are human beings, the entire scenario will change if they can understand and accept that you are dealing with human beings. What is the reality? The reality is, and we don't need to say it, we've heard it now the last couple of weeks now, that the Palestinians, they are either subhumans or they're animals, but they are not human beings, and definitely not on par and the same status that God has given to the Jews. Whereas we said, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, Allah, that He has honored all the children of Adam. The question of religion does not feature here. Allah has given status and has given honor to all the children of Adam. After that, whatever happens after that, that is something else. The point here, which I want to conclude with, and that is that where are those people? How do they understand this ayah? And so many, one of many ayah, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَكُرْهٌ لَكُمْ, where Allah mentions about now that there are times when you have to stand up. When you have to stand up militarily, you have to stand up. You have to take, as we say, the sword in that time. We have to pick up arms at these times. As much as you hate it, as much as we don't want blood in itself the spilling of blood in itself in jihad is not noble in itself. In itself, it's not noble. It is what? It is the intention. It is the end. It is the what? It is the agenda that you have when you do go into jihad. And it is peace of Allah. Allah grant us tawfiq and understand, inshallah, on this particular point.
I mean, and Brother Badr, in fact, as Imam Fawad says, it is time to stand up, and the time is now to stand up. The ayat that Imam Fawad spoke about as if it was revealed after the 7th of October to the Ummah, because that is exactly what the ayat speaks about. But I also know that, you've been following these Muslim leaders throughout this entire war that is taking place, their appearances, their statements. Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali spoke about Blinken and his visit early into this war as well. There was a reason as to why Blinken visited these Arab leaders. And when we look at them, we look at what they've got to say, their body language, and sometimes just to appease the masses in their own country, as Erdogan had done, where he had 1 million people out in the streets protesting. He made certain statements to appease people. But again, it's about actions that speak louder than words. Worst case scenario, you could not even expel the Israeli ambassador out of your country. When you have countries like Chile, like Bolivia, like Colombia doing it, these Muslim leaders, impotent. And I just need your take, your thoughts, observing these Muslim leaders, how they have been reacting to this crisis and what they've been doing, Mazhar.
Erdogan is very similar to Gamal Nasser from the 50s and 60s. He talked a lot, motivated a lot, but didn't do much. Erdogan can act. He's very powerful. When they had the coup in Turkey, he arrested something like 500,000 people from the armed forces, from the judiciary, from civil society, from business, from education, from everywhere. And he locked them up. He had 3 years of emergency rule. There, the excuse that some of his supporters give, there's too many Kemalis he needs to look after. Where were the Kemalis then? He arrested 500,000 people and he put them in prison and processed them. So he does have the ability. Now, something Imam Fuad meant about jihad, something very important about that. In its origin, and this verse he quoted about the people in the village saying that the people here are oppressing us, from the men, women, and the children. Jihad originally came for the non-Muslim, not for the Muslim. It's to liberate the non-Muslims from the oppression of the rulers. That's how Islam spread. Islam never forced anybody to embrace Islam. Islam just removed the evil authorities over their heads. And over time, people embraced Islam. Now, we are not even fighting jihad to protect the Muslims themselves. This is secondary now. First is actually offensive to liberate the non-Muslims, because the Prophet is rahmatul lil alameen. So they can see the benefit of the Sharia, which gives them peace and security and food in their stomach, so they can think about higher goals in life. What is this life about? So jihad came for that. And what's happened now, alhamdulillah, is all these fake methods that we were given that appeal to the UN, that's a dead duck now. When people said, write to your MPs, the MPs in the UK who are Muslim can't even help themselves. I think you may have heard of the example I gave earlier in one of my other talks, that the most powerful Muslim politician in Britain is Hamza Yusuf. He is the First Minister of Scotland. Basically, he's the Prime Minister of Scotland. His mother-in-law is stuck in Gaza. She's pleading for her life. And what does Hamza Yusuf say? I agree with the right of Israel to defend itself. So we know in his heart what he thinks, but his mouth won't allow to say it. Why? Because this political, secular, democratic system is there to protect the interest of the corporate elite. You cannot speak your mind. In Britain, in my Jum'ah, this Friday in Jum'ah, the Imam didn't even mention Palestine. After the khutbah, there was uproar in the masjid. There's about hundreds of people praying in this masjid. There was an uproar. And then they noticed that the MP, the member of parliament for Manchester, which is a Muslim guy, was in the majlis. And they asked him, you said publicly that you defend the right of Israel to defend itself. He ran from the masjid. So if these MPs can't even help themselves, they've got prominent positions, shadow cabinet ministers, cabinet ministers in Scotland. If they can't help the Muslims, how are they going to help you? Your writing letters to them is a waste of time. Keir Starmer, who's going to be the new Prime Minister in the UK next year, he said, I absolutely defend the right. I don't even call for a ceasefire. That's the extent to which they're going to. Now, so that door's closed. The UN door's closed. We know the Arab rulers' door's closed. The only door left is for the Ummah to rely upon itself, to appeal to the armies directly, and to overthrow your regimes, and actually go and help to stop the killing. You know, if the Egyptian army just said, we're just going to the border, I'm pretty certain the Israelis would drop their arms and flee. If they are scared of a few people from Gaza, if a proper army goes there, they will not fight, they will flee. We won't even have to engage in battle if we sent an army there. But they need to do that. We need to overthrow this government, and we need to work to reunify the Ummah, because we don't have a political voice at the leadership level, at the global level. The whole world is led by the Western-led global institution. The UN is there to protect the Western powers. If you look at the 5 permanent members, 4 of them are Western powers: Britain, France, Russia, America. China is the other one. If they veto something, it's finished. So the UN was established to maintain the geopolitical balance as it was after the Second World War. They will never allow any kind of change to that. That's why the UN is not an option for the Muslims, is there to protect the West. We have to now look that we need to work outside of their structures, outside of their systems. We need to go independent, because we've got more cards in our favor. The West needs the Middle East. The Middle East doesn't need the West. Like in 73, when the Saudis turned the oil off, how much they suffered. Today we are supplying oil to the Israelis. If the Muslims just switched off the gas and oil, that would be, we don't even need to go for jihad. Yes, jihad is an obligation on us, and we need to do that if it came to that. But we don't even need to go that far. We could just turn off the supplies, boycott the state, and break all ties with Western powers. It is our money that keeps the economies going. When they had a financial crisis in 2008, it was the Bahrainis, the Qataris, the Omanis, all these people were sending their money to liquidate the banks in the West. The Qataris own more property in London than they own in Qatar itself. So our money, our resource is being used to facilitate the Western economies. They need us, we don't need them. And that's why they've got puppet rulers there to protect their interests. And the Ummah needs to realize we are in the strong position. We are not weak. We are in the strong position, but it is our rulers who have become subservient to the West, which has created this weakness. And if you notice, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, rahimahullah, when the Crusaders occupied, he analyzed and understood the problem was the political division. So he spent 14 years, even though Masjid Al-Aqsa was occupied for 88 years, he spent 14 years unifying the North Africans, the Yemenis, and the Muslims of Asham behind the Khalifa in Baghdad. Once he achieved that, then he went to Al-Quds, and in one battle he expelled the Crusaders, because he realized the problem was the political disunity. The Ummah will always be good and bad. If you remember, at the time of Salah ad-Din, the Fatimids ruled Egypt, and the Fatimids were outside the fold of Islam. So it's not even a case of these were bad Muslims. They were outside the fold of Islam. They were openly drinking and doing all sorts of fahisha. It's at that time the Nasr of Allah came through Salah ad-Din, because he recognized the weakness was not the individual Muslims, but the collective political disunity of the Ummah, which was causing it weakness. And when Salah ad-Din achieved victory, within a blink of an eye, people in Egypt embraced proper Islam and started to be good Muslims, and he established the madrasa system in Egypt. But it was the other way around. The politics he solved, and then the Ummah was rectified. And now we're trying to do it the opposite way.
Yes, and also to bring Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali into the discussion once again. Maulana, what we see has been taking place in Gaza, and clearly when one looks at the will of the people of Palestine, the will of the people of Gaza, we've heard some amazing stories that have come out. We've heard about the smell of musk emanating from the bodies of the shuhada. We've heard about how willingly they've embraced martyrdom. We've seen little children, an 8-year-old child preparing a will and sending her will out. Now, which 8-year-old child prepares a will, preparing for death, preparing to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We've seen all of these amazing things happen in Gaza. And yet, Maulana, sadly, sometimes we sit back, we look, we criticize, we want to debate the Iman, we want to debate this, we want to debate that. And clearly at a time like this, when all of this that is unfolding in front of our very own eyes, when we see about how willingly and how happy they are to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you see a father telling his son, wipe your tears, when you see entire families that have been wiped out and they are being, obviously, they are being congratulated. When you see them congratulated in the hospital, all of this put together tells us that, these are very, very special people, Maulana. And these are people that need help. They need to be supported and should give us even more reason, as Brother Mazhar has said, as Imam Fuad has spoken about, quoting the Quranic ayats in terms of the help, the support, and also in terms of why jihad is so necessary at this point in time, at this juncture.
There's a few points, Haji Inayat, and my apologies. I have a problem here with my battery span on my phone. But just very quickly to say, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is prophesied, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي ظاهرين على الحق. When we consider and look at this particular hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it speaks about a selected band and group of people, a people who will remain steadfast. Gaza and the history of Gaza and the people of Gaza and the people of Al-Quds, and they have taken this mentorship to say that we are that particular group of people. The bravery and courage, the self-determination. By now, the Zionists, by killing children, see, it is not the first time that they're killing children. The child butchering has happened previously. It is almost to say that they are wanting to remove forcefully these innocent children, so that there is not going to be a generation that will stand up. However, a next generation has been given birth to already. That generation is ready. They are witnessing and seeing. They've not gone to sleep. They will never go to sleep. The thibat, the steadfastness, and the sumut, as well as that particular self-determination. If 1948 has taken place, and the Nakba took place, and the Al-Aqsa took place, and the Palestinian people, they are saying, "Walam narka, walam nasjud." We are not going to bow down to anyone. Our sujood is only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is so disgraceful to this particular Zionist entity is they move off from Gaza, then the people are more celebrating, and despite the fact what they've experienced of atrocities. The reality of the situation is that Allah has blessed this particular people. Their level of iman, their level of faith, their level of being connected with Allah, their level of wanting to achieve shahada. I was there, alhamdulillah, with Maulana Ihsan's leadership in 2011. And the pride that people take in their homes, their frames, where the frames are, and that particular frames, the mothers would say, "This is our pride. This is our son that he has been chosen by Allah to become shaheed." La ilaha illallah. Having said that, the brutality, the atrocity, the genocide, and the massacre, and somebody used the word Holocaust, of what we're witnessing now in Gaza, ably supported by the West, and the silence by the Arab leaders. La ilaha illallah. It's devastating. But you cannot take away. And there's so much of destruction. And how these people are really around through the words of Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Our dependence and reliance is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He suffices for us. Allahu Akbar wa lillahi alhamd. And so I would want to conclude this particular point by saying we must take courage from the people, or the Palestinian people. We must take courage from their determination. One of the things that the Zionists is wanted to have happen is the population in Gaza must almost free themselves from Hamas as a resistant movement. And to one thing to say that Hamas are the people of Gaza. Hamas are the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are in resistance. Long before the birth of Hamas, the Palestinian people has been in resistance. Long before Hamas establishment, the people of Palestine has been massacred and they have been placed under this military occupation. And it's still happening. So the reality of what we witness in Gaza, Al-Gaza Al-Izza, Gaza Al-Sumud, Allahu Akbar wa lillahi alhamd. May Allah purify my heart and to grant me and our offspring to have the courage and the bravery and the determination. The other day I was thinking and reflecting, our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught this ummah to stand firm. Look at what happened in the period of Makkatul Mukarramah. Not to bow down to paganism, not to give in to the atrocities that is being given out to the mother Sayyidatina Sumayya radiallahu ta'ala anha, to the men and women in during that particular period of time. There was a determination to stand firm, not to give in. And this is where the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhu's offspring and grandchildren are today, that has adopted and upheld these particular wonderful characteristics, that so much so that we should be able to aspire for. May Allah bless them and grant them victory. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the full reward and the istiqamah and the steadfastness. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant ease in their plight of hardships and difficulties. And let the ummah wake up to this particular cries of what we witness on our screens.
Ameen. Jazakallah for that, Maulana. And Imam Fuad, as Maulana mentioned, let the Ummah wake up. And I think to a large extent, the Ummah has waken up, particularly the Ummah on the ground. In fact, to the extent that we've been basically obsessed, we've been overwhelmed by what is taking place in Gaza. In fact, we see it on WhatsApp groups. We see it as a discussion point, a talking point. And this has actually happened, that this has actually rallied the Ummah together. And just looking at it, and sometimes looking at the soda water bottle effect, where when the crisis is over, we actually go back again to where we've been. But the key issue here is to understand, that this is going to be a long battle, is going to be an ongoing struggle all the time. And I'm going to ask Brother Mazhar also to comment on this, because I know Brother Mazhar and Hizb Tahrir, you've been relentless in this call that you've been making all the time. I just want for your thoughts, Imam Fuad Samai, as a Muslim Ummah, where we are at this point in time, what should we be doing?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I just want to latch onto one particular point, which before I get to your question, Inayat, which Maulana Abdul Khalik made about the next generation of Mujahideen. They are already born, and there is another generation waiting to be born, and they will be followed by another generation. Let me give you one example. In 1992, the first ulama delegation of South Africa were invited to Palestine, and I happened to be in that delegation, comprising only of ulama. On the last day of our stay in Palestine, we were going to depart from Masjid Al-Aqsa. From there, we're going to straight to the airport and depart. There was a little boy whose father happened to be our guide. He had a son by the name of Malik, who also went around with us. This boy was about 9 or 10 years old. One of the ulama, known to all of us, he told this little boy that, Malik, don't you want to come with us to South Africa? You will be out of all this danger. We will put you in the best of schools. You will have everything that you desire as a child. You'll be able to live your life as a child. And all these big, big promises made to this little boy, Malik. We were standing in the grounds of Masjid Al-Aqsa at the time when we mentioned this now. This little boy, 9 years old, he stood there. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. He turned around to the Qibli Masjid and he pointed there and he said, "Uncle, if I go, who is going to liberate Masjid Al-Aqsa?" A 9-year-old boy. A 9-year-old boy. So what we say is there is already another generation. If the Zionists at the current times speak about the total annihilation of Hamas, for example, now, it is that they should understand it's Afghanistan. This is Afghanistan. It's just another sort of group of giants that will be born. If you ask what we should do, that in this particular fatwa which you referred to earlier, there's another fatwa also came, and we don't want to go into the 50 details of this particular fatwa, speaking about that this jihad is fardu kifaya. Fardu kifaya in the sense that for those who are in the immediate vicinity of where the need is, or in a place where the need is, it would be for those people to stand up on behalf of the Ummah. They should be supported by their neighbors, in other words, which in this case would be Egypt, be Jordan, and be those countries, and then of course Saudi and the Arab countries. And eventually it should branch out that way. Eventually it becomes Fardul Ain, and it will reach each and every Muslim who should be prepared to do it. I remember in 1967, in a house in Salt River in Cape Town, when the war broke out between Egypt and Israel, the 1967 war, put it this way, Muslims were actually, and I saw this with my own eyes, queuing up to come and sign up for jihad, to fight on the side of the Arabs at the time. If you ask what we should do, that it is easy for us, people speak about, that what they call it now, keyboard warriors. It's easy for us to sit here and we are going to preach to others what should be done. We should ask ourselves, what am I prepared to do? If each one of us say that, well, what can I do? At this particular point in time, at least the least is that the desire should be in our heart for jihad. Even though we cannot, circumstances don't allow us to physically be there and partake in this jihad, in our heart of hearts, we should be prepared and make the intention of jihad. Of course, you have heard, and I'm not going to repeat what you have heard since forever about the importance of dua, and do not underestimate the power of dua, which we will never do. Understand? We should continue with that. Whatever we can do, the two things I would like to warn the Ummah about, and that is, you will be bombarded, and we are being bombarded by mainstream media who will try and push a narrative. And Muslims, be aware, they are making inroads, the news media, mainstream news media, that they are making inroads into the hearts of certain Muslims who are, of course, the spokespersons, whether it is official or non-official, on behalf of those regimes, those Arab regimes, that where they would speak and they would come up with a point which I made earlier about that Palestine is not our responsibility. And the Quran has given that, and I think that we have covered already, given the land to. Let us be careful about the narrative that's going to come out of there. I would like to hear from Sheikh Mazhar, inshallah, what, that they are in this particular field, what else can be done. What I know as example, that what I would like to see for us here in South Africa is that we should definitely put all these Arab embassies, we should put them under tremendous pressure. We know that it may count for little, but they should, a very clear message should be sent to them that this is what we think of you. You are a disgrace to this ummah. You're an embarrassment. When we speak to non-Muslims, one tend to ask this question, if I was a non-Muslim, but where are these oil-rich Arab countries? Where are they? Yes, we know that the money is all tied up in the West. We know all the investments running to trillions of dollars. We know about all about that now. What we are saying is that at this particular point in time, that you are on the wrong side of history, and you will remain very soon. In the case of, this is the last point here, that King Faisal is example now. When King Faisal, at the time, when he just spoke about an Arab bloc, getting an Arab bloc, we don't have to go into those details there. When he spoke about it, and he was the president of Pakistan at the time, and you find that he was assassinated. I think that particular part of history, we should actually go and study and read up on this now, that where we find that how he was assassinated, as well as that Pakistan, was it, I can't recall the name offhand now, but nevertheless, say again?
Was it Zulfikar Ali Bhutto you're referring to?
Zulfikar, that's correct. So there you are. So what we are saying is that we need, from our side, whatever we can do, we will have to put these regimes, all these embassies, we need to pressurize them not to take action. We don't want action from them. In fact, it will be a blessing if they stay out of it. It will be a blessing if they stay out of it and let the people of the countries take over this particular jihad, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah, Jazakallah for that. And Mother, as Imam Fawad says, we know about them. We know where they are. They are in Riyadh hosting Shakira at concerts while all the carnage is taking place, while people are actually dying. This is exactly where they are. And again, Mother, as Imam Fawad says, that he'd like to hear from you as far as the Muslim Ummah is concerned. I know in South Africa, for example, as Imam Fawad says, that we're not putting enough pressure. When we march as well, we're going to the US, we're going to the Israeli embassies, but we're not putting any pressure whatsoever on many of these Muslim countries, on these embassies. Just today, after 4 weeks, Sisi, Egypt, opens up the Rafah crossing. After 4 weeks, after thousands of people have died, and saying allowing 81 people for medical treatment. You've got thousands and thousands. You've got close to 20,000 people that are injured. We've had so many people that have died. Today, you find the time to open up the Rafah crossing. That is just one example, and I'm sure there's a lot more, Mazhar.
Gee, no, I think what Imam Fuad said, I echo that. We need to put pressure on the embassies of the Muslim world. And this is what we did here in London. We actually gave the details of the Egyptian and the Turkish embassy. We gave the numbers, we gave the emails, and we asked the people, phone them every day. Keep phoning them and keep asking them, when you're going to send the army. We're not asking the rulers, we're asking you people that work in the embassy, when are you going to send the army? Speak to your army, release the army, because they are our army. And people are doing that. And I think the other thing that Imam Fuad mentioned about the small child in Masjid Al-Aqsa, it reminds me of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. When he was a child, he was playing in the street, and I don't know how true this story is, but it's narrated in the book about his life. His father picked him up and threw him and let him drop. He goes, your mother didn't give birth to you to play in the streets. Your mother gave birth to you to liberate Masjid Al-Aqsa. And the Salah ad-Din stood up. And his father was surprised that he didn't cry. He's just a young boy. He goes, you don't cry? He goes, the one who was given birth to liberate Masjid Al-Aqsa doesn't cry. Now, I'm sure most of the mothers in that time told their children that you are going to free. And I think this Ummah now is very different to what the Ummah was 20, 30, 40 years ago. If you remember, I think it was 1982 when Sabra and Shatila happened, when they massacred 2,000 people in one night in the refugee camps in Lebanon. There was hardly any demonstrations around the Muslim world. Ironically, the one demonstration that did take place was in Tel Aviv by the Jews. But this time, the whole Ummah is ablaze. If you go to Karachi, you've got almost 1 million people on the street there. You go to Cairo, you go to Istanbul, you go to the Muslim capitals around the world. You see the Muslim Ummah in the Western world, they are on fire. And the Ummah is in a different position now. And my appeal to the Ummah is, don't let it settle. This time we are not going to stop until we put pressure on those regimes, and we put pressure on our armies to march, to liberate Masjid Al-Aqsa, to free the people of Gaza, and to unify this Ummah. This Ummah is in a different position, and what the Yahud have done in Gaza in terms of the slaughter and the destruction, it is unbelievable. And to me, I can only see that when oppression is at this height, the Nasr of Allah cannot be too far away. We just have to be patient, in the sense we need to keep persevering, keep calling for the right solution. Right solution is jihad. The right solution is khilafah. The right solution is sharia. This is, as an ummah, what we call for. And we put pressure on our Muslim ummah around the world for our armies to march. And we trust in Allah, but we are not going to give up, and we are not going to take it easy, and we're going to keep pursuing this until we see the Nasr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descend from the skies and in a manifest way. And we will see a victory. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. And when that victory comes, those people in the West who have been oppressed by capitalism and the Western people, they will see the dignity, honor, and respect of Islam. And then we will see again a second migration to the world of Islam, like we saw in Medina Sharif. When people migrated to Medina for Islam, we will see that again, because the Prophet ﷺ prophesied, when the Khilafah comes to Al-Quds, remember, nothing will be able to shift it. Meaning, this will be the final resting place of the Khilafah Rashida. It is coming, it will come, and I'm optimistic that the Ummah is moving forward, and we just need to keep persevering and rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Not your UN, not your government, not your MPs, but on Allah alone and the methods that He's given to us. And with that, I am confident that we are in a new era now, and the Ummah is in a new place. Jazakallah khair.
I mean, Jazakallah khairan so much to you, Brother Mazhar Khan, and also to Imam Fuad Samai, and also Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali. Unfortunately, I think his battery had died, but we say Jazakallah to all of you for being part of this discussion, this panel discussion right here on Salam Media. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your efforts, Allah reward your efforts, and we continue making dua, our unwavering solidarity, our unwavering support for the people of Palestine. We will continue, inshallah, in our efforts to raise awareness and also at the same time to amplify their voices right across the entire world. And we have this firm belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's justice is near. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's justice will be swift, and it will prevail upon the oppressors, inshallah. And at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower them with His mercy, to pour upon them patience, and continue making them steadfast, and to grant them victory, inshallah, over the oppressors. Once again, Jazakallah to all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
Yes, that brings us to the end of this panel discussion once again, and I believe a very necessary discussion, because this is a talking point among the Muslim Ummah. Where are the Muslim armies? Where are the Muslim leaders? Where is the Muslim Ummah? And while all this carnage, while the genocide is unfolding before our very own eyes, we will continue supporting the brothers and sisters out in Palestine, in Gaza, in any way, in every way that we can. And at the end of the day, we continue making dua. Remember those that have passed on, those that have been martyred. They are smiling. They are in a much better place. And this is what the Palestinian nation, the Palestinian brothers, sisters, children, all made of, that they've welcomed, they've embraced martyrdom, because they know that this is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has elevated their ranks. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reunited them with their loved ones in the gardens of Jannah as we speak right now. Ameen. Allahumma ameen. And with that, I'm going to be signing off, inshallah. We'll be back with you once again from myself and the team here at Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.